Sure. Bott. Here. Paulson. Here. Wyand. Here. Springsteen. Here. And Allen. Here. Vershave and Wagner are absent and excused.
Thank you. So do we have any changes to the agenda that anyone would like to see? I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Bott, Springsteen. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, the motion carried. Is there anything on the agenda tonight that anyone has a conflict of interest with? All right, then we will move forward. Public comment. Seeing none and hearing none, we'll move on. Correspondence, there's none. Approval of the minutes. Is there anything anyone would like to discuss in the minutes from June 30th, 2026?
Second.
Paulson and Wyand. All those in favor, signify, discussion. In favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We have no postponed business, we have no public hearings, we have no pending business. So we'll move on to new business, which is the Natural Features Inventory 2026, review and discussion. I will turn this over to our planner, Cody Turner.
Perfect, thank you, Tina. So the main meat of tonight's meeting is to go over the natural features inventory update that was completed here in July. GEI, our consultants, presented this to the township board at their July meeting. It was important, I thought, for the planning commission to take a look at that update and also understand how the NFI interacts with the zoning ordinance and what that might mean for our future as we look at potential zoning changes or changes of intent and following the master plan. So the first question is, what is the natural features inventory? It was first done in 2006. We just did the first update to it in 2026. And what it is a comprehensive inventory of the natural resources that we have here in the township. GEI does a mixture of desktop and in-field work to verify everything from woodlands to wetlands to lakes and streams, just to give us a comprehensive map and comprehensive diagnosis of the current state of our natural features. The purpose of the natural features inventory is a few-fold, but specifically it is used to identify our resources, evaluate our ecological qualities, monitor change, and guide our conservation priorities. That would naturally lead itself to the question of what has the NFI measured and how is it measured? It measures quite a few things. And the experts there at GEI do a wonderful job at breaking them all out for us on our 78, 80-page report. Hopefully you guys had a chance to take a look through. But maybe most importantly, besides looking at the water resources and forest resources, there's two major topics that I kind of want to get into tonight. The first is the natural areas and their priority rankings, and the second is development impact since 2006. So since we've now had an update, we can start to monitor trends as far as what's happened over the last 20 years. The first item, and maybe the most effective to the zoning ordinance, is priority areas. So we have 3 priority natural areas of 1, 2, and 3. GEI creates a map for us, which I've got up on the screen. I've also printed out copies for you guys in front of you because I know it might be difficult to kind of crane your necks and look behind you. At any time, if you need to see a bigger map or image, let me know. We can switch the screen real quick. But what these are starting with priority 1, These are our highest ecological value areas. They're the highest level of protection during review that we have in an application process. Priority 2 is the next step down. It requires careful consideration still, but the resources haven't been identified as the highest value, such as priority 1. And then priority 3, we are recommended to take into consideration the natural features, and they should still influence site design, but is not as high of a value as, say, a priority 1 or priority 2. These areas can change. They change whenever this natural features update is been completed, and in this sense they have. We have some changes to those areas, and we'll get into that shortly. But how we score these is also important to understand that our consultants don't just pick a random parcel or a random area and give it a random priority. They are ranked on a majority of items, or getting lost in my notes, I apologize. They're ranked on a variety of items. Size of the parcel, what habitat's in there, vegetative quality, and parcel fragmentation. And I highlighted this because I wanted to explain it a little further. If you have 3 parcels that are all priority 1 natural area, and they go, west, center, east, and somebody develops the center parcel, and so it's no longer priority 1, maybe it drops down to a priority 3, or maybe it drops down to no priority as far as an ecological value. That would say that block of priority 1 has now been fragmented. It's been split in 2. So when we go through some of these results, part of the reason that some of these results have happened is because of fragmentation. It's natural that when we have developmental pressures, we have a big block of natural features, and you build a development in the middle somewhere, or segregating one side of it or a portion of it, it's going to fragment it. That's things for like wildlife, that's things for vegetation. They don't have the natural flow that it normally would. So that's, I wanted to explain that a little further as we move forward here. And then we might be thinking, well, that's well and good that we hire a consultant to come out, take a look at our priority areas, but what does that really mean for us? And we'll get into that here deeper as far as how it supports the zoning ordinance, because the biggest thing to remember is the NFI is not a regulatory document. Nobody has to follow the NFI. We don't have ordinances on it. It's not a regulatory document in the sense that when a development comes in, there's not rules in there that they have to follow. Those are all put in the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance does reference the NFI in some areas, and that's how it supports the zoning ordinance, is by being the scientific data behind some of the reasoning in your site plan review or use standards that go forward. So I kind of want to break this up into 2 buckets. How the NFI influences the zoning ordinance is 2 ways. One is based on use standards. What I mean by that is there are some uses in our zoning ordinance that have a dependency on the natural features inventory. The one that might be the easiest to explain is section 18.4 is subdivisions without significant open space. This very common, comes before you in an application review where somebody wants to put a site condo in. They're using the whole property. They're not conserving any of it for open space. It's just a big site condo going in. If there is no priority features, natural features in that site condo, it's considered a use by right. If there are natural features, now all of a sudden the conditional land use gets reviewed. So now the use is no longer a use by right. Now the planning commission has a say on its use. So that's showing how the natural features affects those decisions. It's a whole different process if we have a use by right versus if we have a conditional land use. It also affects other areas like a PUD, which is not very common anymore, but maybe an open space conservation development. So if they don't use the whole property for housing and they want to cluster, think Tree Song. Tree Song is that way. So they have 17 acres in the southwest corner that is conserved, and they were able to build a little bit higher density in the northeast corner by saving those 17 acres a priority area. So they have mechanisms in the zoning ordinance that if we're looking to either increase, decrease, or stay the same as far as how we treat priority or natural features in the township, that's how it affects in a standard, from a use standard position. That said, if there's other uses that we feel need to have standards for priority areas, this is how we do it. Yes.
So if I understand you right, does that mean that if we're looking at something where there are uses by right, if it's a priority one, every zoning that we have, there are no uses by right, everything is a conditional use?
No, just on site condominiums, so just on development options.
Okay.
So the NFI primarily affects either commercial development or like a housing development. It doesn't affect, if you are living in a priority one area and you want to cut down some trees to put a house, the NFI does not affect them.
So only
Currently.
things that are already in the zone. Like you don't fix, if I cut down a tree that's not in the zone, but it is if I do it over somebody else.
Correct. It'd be a part of the application for the development process. Are you all right? Okay, good.
So in other words, the NFI is not a legal document, but it has already been written.
I can't hear you, Dan.
Sorry about that.
The NFI is not a legal document, but apparently it has already been written into the zoning ordinance as it stands now. Is that's what I'm asking him?
Correct. It has no regulatory power, but we reference it. And what we do by referencing it is outline areas on our map. So we basically have a huge overlay zone of natural features. It's kind of an ingenious way to do it. It helps not blanket regulation just based on district, because district doesn't follow natural features. So if you're writing natural feature ordinances, it's important to know exactly where they're at. Yes, Pete?
So I'm just as a real-world example, last year, the year before, there was a area that was sort of clear-cut, and that irritated people, and it was part of a larger development. Was that a violation of this, or was that, explain how those things worked for that particular,
Sure,
you know
of
what I'm
course.
talking about?
I do. So that's a tricky question. Here's why. In 2 of our zoning districts, we allow forestry management or clear cutting. We actually promote it as a use by right. So anybody in those districts can cut every tree, and if you're a private homeowner, you can cut every tree. Our zoning ordinance does not speak to that. Our zoning ordinance does not speak to if you own a commercial property, you cut every single tree off of it, and a year later you want to sell it to somebody. It's not a violation of our zoning ordinance. If we can prove that somebody bought a piece of property, knowingly cut down all the priority areas, and then submitted an application with the intent to avoid those procedures, that would be a violation of our zoning ordinance. But the way to prove that would be virtually impossible. How do you prove intent of somebody down the road? I mean, that would be for the courts to decide how that works. But that is written in our zoning ordinance that you're not allowed to affect natural priority areas before submitting an application with the knowing and understanding that you're avoiding that rule.
I'd like to back up just a little bit.
Please.
You had mentioned Tree Song, is it?
Yes.
And there were 17 acres in the southwest that were more or less protected.
Correct.
And those are 1 acre lots, if I understand correctly. What are they?
You know, I don't remember. I don't believe so, though. Under our open space conservation, we incentivize developers to keep larger areas unaffected.
Right.
By giving them the same number of houses they would be allowed, but in a smaller area. So we'll increase the density to, I don't know exactly the size of the lots, but just for math, let's say we have a 40, you take 20 of it and conserve it. We're still going to let you build 40 houses, but now they're going to be on 20.
On smaller
Okay.
lots,
Yeah,
correct.
exactly. Mhm.
But aggregate, I guess, is where it would be based on like
It's based on total parcel size.
low-density
Yep.
residential.
Yep.
So are those 17 acres, this is just for future reference, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
are those 17 acres considered common area?
Common area under their site
Okay.
condo, deed restriction documents.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to
It's
be
not
sure.
open to the public. You and I can't go walk on that property ourselves,
Right.
but any of the homeowners inside that, it's HOA or
Development,
development of some sort,
Yeah.
thank you, they are allowed to go. It's a common element, just like their road would be.
very good, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So just to go back to the first one, we were talking about where there was a development is clear cut.
Yep.
So you're saying that that would happen to be in an area where we allow clear cut?
It didn't. It happened in a commercial zone, yeah. The one that I'm aware of. I mean, we can just call it out. I'm talking
I'm talking about the one that's off Cedar Road.
Brook Valley, okay. That is not the one I'm referring to.
Okay, so when that came before the planning commission,
Yep.
did they have the right to say, refer back to this?
Sure.
Okay.
And they,
Maybe do.
so the way that worked,
Was it a conditional land use as opposed
It
to?
was.
By right?
it was a conditional land use, and what happened was the planning commission approved a site plan that had the verbiage on it that they'll maintain 20 feet of buffer on the backside of the lots, and in addition, as, how was it worded? They would leave as many trees on the parcels they could, but they could remove some trees as necessary. And it was very gray language, so we approved a site plan that showed a bunch of trees around each individual home. And this is before I got here, my understanding is the planning commission said, yep, that's what we want, good to go. The site plan got approved and solidified, and in the site plan in the vegetative area, it basically said, this is what we're hoping to keep, but this is what we're minimally going to keep, and then they ended up cutting all the way to the minimum. So that's how that was different than the perception of when it got approved. Anything since then, the planning commission has been very diligent on putting exact footages of what buffer areas need to be. The one in the hemlocks, the one behind the fire barn, those all have specified buffer areas that they're theoretically not allowed to cut in, which I don't know that this forum maybe isn't the best to go through the details of how that works and what that doesn't. Maybe the ad hoc committee can get into that, but that's also a little bit sticky as far of us imposing deed restrictions on somebody, but then they can go change the deed restrictions without our say. So there's got to be a better mechanism to do that moving forward.
And then my other question is, when we leave, like it's open space development, right, we leave open space.
Yep.
Do we then, or can we then require that within their, what's the document, like bylaws? and-
Condo docs?
Yeah,
Mhm.
condo docs, that is required, so that people in the future know, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that would be done within their Exhibit B drawing, which shows all the lots that are done. And then it's done within the condo docs, and that makes it a common area.
Right.
So
okay.
that it's just like the road. They all have to pay to maintain it. They all have access to it. Yeah, yeah.
But we can put restrictions on their common area.
Yes, we do.
These priority
Mhm.
areas in a conditional
Yes.
use. Okay.
So what kind of language is added to is required in their condo docs that prevents them from 10 years down the road amending them?
It must be the master deed.
The master deed will say, like, in order to change anything in this master deed, you need a majority or supermajority in order to change it. So let's say they need a supermajority, and 80% of the homeowners want to take that common area and they want to do X with it.
So basically, the homeowners association has the right to override the planning commission, is what I'm hearing you say.
No, because I'm thinking back to, you know, what
Yeah.
Anyways, like the 150%, like you have to sell it 150% AMI, that's actually in the master deed, and you put a time limit on it, and it can't be changed, it's within that time limit. After that time limit, they can go back and change it, but they can't within that. So, it's probably, you can do that in a master deed, but you can't
Yeah.
in bylaws, because they can change the bylaws.
So in other words, you're saying that the township can put a limit on what kind of changes can happen in the master deed, but not in the bylaws? Is that what you're saying?
The bylaws could be changed.
Yeah.
The master
Because-
deed, you could put in enough
Yeah,
regulatory language that it could.
Yeah, I understand that. So my question was, if we require in the bylaws that there are certain areas set aside, the homeowners association eventually can override the mandate of the planning commission.
Potentially. I guess I would consult legal if that ever came up.
I think, could we do that at some point?
Yeah, I'll loop Todd in.
Where would we put that if we wanted to?
Yeah,
It
because
doesn't
this
make
is-
any sense to make an ordinance that has no teeth.
Right.
I agree. This also rears its head when we also have rules on site condos that you have to plant 3 deciduous trees with at least 2.5-inch caliper on every lot. The problem is that tells you to put it in the deed, but as soon as the developer sells all the property and the homeowners want to get rid of that portion of the deed, they have the right to do so. So we have something, again, that we ask them to do to get approval for a conditional land use, yet they can change it down the road. So we'll have to ask Todd a better way of creating a mechanism so that what the planning commission desires when these applications are reviewed are indeed carried out in perpetuity.
Right.
So, yeah, very astute.
Trees
Potentially, but you're also allowed to sell your house to a different builder. I mean,
I was gonna say they sell lots to other builders.
Yeah.
and-
or private builders, or so far, we haven't had to deal with it. I'm not naive enough to think that it will come up at some point. There's definitely better mechanisms to keep enforcement and intent clear, but if you talk to anybody in the planning community, tree or vegetative or natural ordinances are the hardest to create and enforce. So we're on an uphill battle here, but we'll get through it and figure it out. Any other questions on use standards before I go to site plan review?
Yeah, I
Just-
wanna- go ahead.
We've been kind of referring to trees, but there are wetlands too.
Yeah,
And would we have the same issues where they, and might have to do with, what is the terminology, controlled wetlands? and non-controlled?
yeah. So the state of Michigan Eagle Environmental, oh gosh,
Energy Great Lakes. and-
thank you. It used to be
I know them
DEQ, they changed it a couple times. So they regulate wetlands to an extent. So they have a map, it's called the Wetlands Viewer, that shows what wetlands they regulate. So for example, Fireside over here has a small wet area in the northeast corner. That is an unregulated wetland from the state. So when we reviewed it, if my recollection is clear, planning commissioner members said, what are you going to do about the wetland? They said they're going to put the drive on the opposite sides. That's how they protected that area. Now, that said, do we have the right to say you need to have a buffer of 20 feet around this wetland? 100%. The zoning ordinance gives you guys the right to do that. Did we at the time? No. I don't know that it'll be an issue. It depends. Each site's going to be a little different, right?
Sure.
Some wetlands are going to be a half an acre, some are going to be 2 acres. So yes, I mean, when we do a natural features inventory, it's not only trees. Trees are just usually the first thing that comes up.
Right.
And sometimes when I refer to trees, I'm actually referring to vegetative buffers in general. It just is a shorthand for it. Danny, do you have a question before I move on?
Somewhere in here, they combine other wetlands, but basically the non-regulated ones are small, they're not connected to,
And we'll get into the results.
water to another.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it'd be less than an acre.
I think so, yeah. And we'll get into the results, but our wetland footprint has been virtually unchanged since 2006. And part of the reason is because they're so heavily regulated at the state level. Good, okay. So that was use standards. The second, probably more common way that we see the NFI play a role in the zoning ordinance is through an application review. So site plan reviews are required for any conditional land use or any commercial zoned property in the township. Most of those site plan reviews come before the commission. Excuse me. Some go to staff if it's an administrative site plan review. Those are limited in size and scope and don't change uses, and they're fairly straightforward, and so the zoning ordinance is written not to bring it before you and let staff handle 2 parking space change or so on and so forth. So every time that we have a conditional land use, we have a site plan review. And then on top of that, we sometimes have a site plan review just by itself. So Clough's that we had last meeting, that was just a site plan review by itself. Long Lake Storage Vault was a conditional land use with a site plan on top of it. Through our site plan review, if it's found that the subject property is a priority 1, 2, or 3 natural area, we have varying levels of regulation that play a role in the decision that we make. Priority 1 has the most stringent regulations, then priority 2, then priority 3. The thing, I don't know, the verbiage is written with enough, without, how do you phrase this? It's written ambiguous enough that it allows for some site-specific variation, but it also is written ambiguous enough that it's not as strict, I think, as maybe the original intent. And what I say by that is priority 1 will talk about you need to keep every single natural feature inventory area, keep it untouched, unless it's unavoidable, then you can do X, Y, and Z. Well, how do you determine whether it's unavoidable or not? It's a fairly gray area that the 7 of you have to weed through every time it comes up. I think with this renewed natural areas map that the NFI created, and you'll see in some of the results that we're going to go through, we may want to take a look at that through the tree preservation committee, is I assume the most natural place for this, on how we might be able to shape that a little different with either a different mechanism or different verbiage so that the clear intent is carried out and there's not so much gray. When there's gray, it confuses the seven of you, it confuses staff, and it confuses the developer. It makes processes take longer, and it makes it more unequal across the board. So the more direct we can be, the better, and I think that's some area for growth that we have there. And I'm not going to read section 24.5.2. It's multiple pages long. I hope if you get a chance, you'll take a look at it, but you'll definitely see it on the next site plan review that comes up. So now we get into why the 2026 update matters. If we had one already, why is it important to update it again? Well, it directly affects your site plan review. Like I just mentioned, with an updated map, depending on what priority area it is, it will have a say on how much regulatory power or what factors go into approving that site plan. And then maybe most importantly is by updating that NFI, we are able to see how the township has changed in 20 years. Some of us have lived on and off in the township amongst those 20 years and have seen it anecdotally or maybe as you drive by into town, but to have solid numbers that GEI put together really helps us take a look at this and inform our planning decisions moving forward. On the screen, you'll see on the left-hand side, it's the 2026 updated natural features inventory. On the right-hand side is any area that has changed since 2006. If you look at it, something probably will scream out to most of you. Almost all of those areas that are shaded in purple are a development of some sort. They're either a site condo or a PUD or an open space conservation development. And that is natural. We have development pressures coming to build more housing, but we want to keep our natural areas. So obviously, when the two conflict, we're going to have to find a balance or compromise somewhere. There are different developments that have saved more priority areas than others. In the top left, it's section 6. You'll see that the items that changed are fairly small. They're limited to the lot, basically, of that development. Whereas something like the east side of the township, where there's a large rectangular parcel, has changed almost the entire parcel as far as how many priority areas there are or what type they are. And then you have something in the middle, like we mentioned earlier, Tree Song is in a section in the southwest corner of the township by Westwood Drive there in Teal and Fisher. It's, half the parcel is saved in a priority and half of it isn't. So this is why when we look at our different use standards, we can see the impacts it has 20 years later. If developments keep going in, and I can guarantee you with where we live and what properties we have left, developments will keep going in. We currently have a few different ways to help protect the natural areas, and we can see how those affect our future. Before I move on to this, is there any questions? I think next slide we'll get to the actual numbers of the results. So GEI put together a table for us, which are woodlands from 2006 to 2026 have changed slightly, not much. Actually, I calculated it's less than 1%, which over 20 years and adding 3,000 to 5,000 people, depending on which count you believe, that's pretty good. It's a great way to add housing demand, but still keeping our natural areas. Our natural areas in general decreased by 381 acres. That's 3%. So we've increased 30% in population, but have only decreased our natural areas by 3%. The biggest change is the priority rankings. So we lost almost 10% of our priority 1 areas in 20 years. They have migrated a few places. They've migrated primarily into priority 2. They've added 465 acres, and some into priority 3, and then some of them are lost. Earlier when I was discussing parcel fragmentation, that plays a large role in GEI being able to calculate what priority you have. If you get fragmented by development, your priority drops. So that's why you see a major drop from priority 1 to priority 2. Those natural features are still there. It's still the same tree. It's still the same undergrowth, it's just been divided up by development. Our wildlife corridors, we've only lost one. Our wetlands, this is what we were discussing earlier, we've lost 6 acres. Of that 1,400, I don't know the exact number, but Eagle regulates a majority of them by far. Our scenic view sheds, we've also only lost one. And then the land that's protected by the township. So in 2006, we had 550 acres of township land that were protected for the natural areas. And now in 2026, we have 1,390. So we've added 834 acres, which is exactly 150% more. So the township board uses the NFI to impact natural areas how they can. And that's one of the ways they do that is by acquiring land. And then lastly, our open space has gone up a couple hundred acres as well. Questions on that before we move forward? Yes, Pete.
So on the protected by Long Lake, are you including things that the Nature Conservancy has done, like with the Girl Scout camp, or is that only the parks and things that the township owns?
Yeah, think like Timbers, think Cedar Creek Natural Area, think South Long Lake Park. Most of our conserved areas will be open to the public, so it'll take the form of a park. And we've purchased quite a few acres, or I've been gifted quite a few acres in 20 years.
Do you know if there are individuals in our township who have conservation easements on their own properties that are not open to the public? But
I'm sure there are. I know of a few anecdotally, but I don't know exactly numbers or who they are.
I was actually going to say that because when I look at the 46 that large parcels within the natural areas map, and then there's a bunch of things that are like diagrams.
Yep.
And I know one of them behind myself is a conservation.
So there's a few of them that have CFP, which is commercial forestry protection. And those are required, I'm sorry? So commercial forestry protection have to be open to the public. So there's one off of Barney, and forgive me, I can't think of the name. If you go off of Barney, I think it's,
But I think they're striped. So
But-
that was my question. on
they might be.
What's the difference between open space, like it says open space, and it has like,
But commercial forestry protection can come and go, so you can put your property in.
Correct, yep.
Get back out. Conservation easement is a permanent
oh,
easement.
do they?
Unless you pay back taxes on it, is my understanding. So if somebody puts something in a conservation easement and gets a tax break for it, if you pay back taxes on it, but that's not a positive. It's just, I know that there's a lot of different forms of CEs, and from what I've been educated on by, like the Benzie Conservation District and some of our other areas that work on that, some of them can be pulled out, or they are on a timeline. So just because they have a CE doesn't mean it's permanently protected, but some of them, I agree with you, Pete, are.
I think a lot of them are.
Okay.
I just didn't know if we had any in the township.
We do.
We have one at the end of Crescent Shores, Andy Vandermolen's property from years ago. That was handled by the Land Conservancy,
Mhm.
but they tend not to be doing these smaller parcels anymore because it ties up their resources.
Yep.
And like
Yeah.
Kansas, Carter Strong Bird Sanctuary.
Right, Carter Strong, right.
Are we including
I
those?
just wondered on this map, because that would be, it wasn't included in the study, but that would be something I.
Be interesting. The issue I think the township should realize with that is that's all driven by private ownership. That's fully the elective of that landowner to choose to do so.
But those are the ones that are probably going to be developed.
Sure.
So that's why I'm like, I want to be able to tell, I would love to be able to tell which of these things, I think somewhere it shows private.
So the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy also makes a variation of an NFI. They call it something different. Excuse me, but they list their land on priority based on what is most beneficial to be preserved, and that's how they go go educate landowners about CEs and conservation, that kind of thing. So they're already working on that day in and day out as far as the private sector goes.
Yeah, so but this again, that same one, large parcels within, you can't really tell, it says open space, but you can't really tell which is publicly held and which is not publicly held within those priority, and I don't know if there's another one. I'm thinking, I'm literally gonna go back to where you live, right? And we know there's a couple parcels back in there that, man, if they sell, it's gonna be a big flipping deal, right? And they're in priority one, so around Cedar Lake, which is protected in a lot of places. So how do we, I don't know, I feel like that would be helpful to us someday, is to actually figure out which ones are publicly and privately held. I thought we used to have a map 100 years ago, or probably 2006 or before, where it actually said this much is in commercial forest, this much is privately owned, this much is publicly owned.
So I can actually comment on all of these. Are you on page 46 of the?
That's where I am right now.
Okay. So if everybody wants to slowly get there, you're talking about all the hashed areas, right?
Well, they say open space, but it doesn't make any sense to me that they're open space, but yes, some are parks.
Yeah, open space is defined weird, and I'll zoom up to it here in a second. But of the areas that are listed, almost all of those are publicly owned either by the township itself. So we have Cedar Creek Natural Area, we have South Long, we have Timbers, we have Twin Lakes. The big area in the bottom left, the southwest quadrant of the township, is state land. The area, Dan, maybe you can comment on this better than I can, in the northwest sector is in section 6. I believe that's an open space conservation development, and that's why it's listed there.
Is that yours?
Yeah.
And that is why those areas are all hashed like that.
So
The
what
area
is
by,
Wheelock Lake?
that is a CFP from my understanding, a
Okay,
commercial
that's what
forest.
I thought.
Because you're allowed to go in there and hunt, I do know that. You're allowed there to go to walk. I know there's lots of people that walk their animals and I guess pets, dogs, those types of things. So those are all areas, and open space isn't defined as like a field.
Okay,
Oh,
so it's really publicly held,
yep, exactly.
or open to public use.
Let me read the exact definition just to make sure that we're, I'm not
Open space
misquoting.
is a weird- Because there's neighborhoods that have open space.
Sure.
But,
So GEI defines open space. Oh, come on now. I know you have a definition. There you go. Open space defined as undeveloped areas accessible by the public.
Okay,
It's not privately held or.
It can be privately held, but still be accessible to the public.
privately owned.
Privately owned, yeah. So CFP stuff is privately owned, but has to be open to the public. Yep. Or publicly owned lands are open to the public.
What is that one line?
I'm a little confused by that. This is off the record, but.
Oh, that's Bullhead.
In Cedar Valley Ridge, that's listed as open space, but that's only
For the condo.
part of the condo.
It might be a mistake on GEI's part.
That's what I thought. We had it over, can it gotta be?
That's fair. All right.
Some really important parcels
I agree.
that are privately owned.
And from a planning trending standpoint, any large parcel that goes for sale is going to be developed. The developer can pay top dollar for it. They can subdivide it. It's a use by right in the entire state of Michigan for site condos. It's not something we're able to tell them they can't do. Now we can put regulation on it, but it's a use they're allowed to do. So it's just the nature of the beast. We're going to get development pressure. Everybody is slowly moving west and slowly moving east out of town. Town's going to continue to get bigger. They got to go somewhere. Everybody likes to live in Long Lake because you're at most 10 miles out of town. You can drive in, drive out in the same day. As you well know, it's a highly desirable place to live, such that housing prices are now median at $550. Parcels of land for an acre are going for $75 to $100. It's going to be continually a spot developers want to develop because they can make their ROI.
Just because I'm old, I gotta say this.
Mhm.
So when I moved here in '76, worked for Reef Petroleum, if anybody knows anyway. So I worked there, and there was a man who lived there, Dennis Schlooney, and does everybody know who Dennis is? He lives like west Long Lake by Route, like, so he's got property in Route and then Long Lake. It's a lot of property. We all thought that he was insane for buying something that far out of town, and he paid $25,000 for his property. And everybody
Well,
So yes, it's changed.
yeah, and it's going to continue to get done.
It's called vision.
So that's a good topic to move us into the next, or the last part of the slideshow here, which is talking about what are the next steps. So now that we know what our natural features inventoried are, we know how they've changed from 2006 to 2026, what's the next logical progression for us? There's a few things, like I mentioned earlier, there's this natural balance that we have to do between, we have housing needs, but we have natural areas to protect. Think of the zoning ordinance really as an incentivization document. If you're allowing somebody to do a development, you're allowing them to make money with their property. If the township's priorities are to save natural areas, you can incentivize. So like with open space conservation, if somebody decides to leave that 17 acres that they want to leave as open space, and they can build a little denser homes, still make their ROI, it's benefiting both the developer and the township. There's a little give and take to balance there. The other thing that I think is key is standardized preservation methods, meaning every development we should treat equally in the sense that they should have the same rules to follow. I understand site plans are needed to review certain variances, but having a standardized preservation method like a setback for natural features, instead of us trying to figure it out on the fly each application that comes up, we can set those so that you guys, staff, and developers all know what's expected of them when they come to the table. They know that in priority 1 areas, they have to save X number of feet per lot. Priority 2 maybe is a little less, priority 3 maybe it's less than that. Whatever the mechanism may be, we should have something standardized across the board. And then lastly, maybe more quickly, is incorporating these findings into our tree preservation ad hoc committee. That committee has not met for a little while, waiting on this, not to waste anybody's time. We wanted to make sure we had all the facts in front of us. So it's going to play a major role in the discussions that are held there, and then ultimately what report is given to you at the end of that. Like I mentioned, there's 2 main ways that we affect the zoning ordinance with this study. The first is through an application process. These are going to be your site review standards. And then the second is through the use standards that we create in the zoning ordinance. If there's any other intensive use that the Planning Commission thinks natural area preservation should be implemented in, we can evaluate that and make sure really that our regulations align with our current planning objectives. So I got one more slide here for you. Lastly, just if we take anything away from this meeting, is that in practice, the NFI is our scientific foundation. It is not a regulatory document, that is the zoning ordinance, but we can reference it knowing it that we have the consultant that put that together for us. And then that should be our goal, is to align our regulatory framework with the studies that we have in place. And so getting the studies and the framework to match is one of the hardest things to do, but that is one of the things that we're tasked with as a planning commission, and that's what we should be focused on moving forward when it comes to the natural features. So, that's all I have prepped for you guys. I was hoping this would stir some discussion, which it has. I'm here and willing to talk about anything that we've covered, if anybody has further questions or any other confusion about how these 2 documents interact or.
So I have back on what their questions talks about lake stuff. Geez, I can still remember we had a grant, I don't know, like early 2000s, to try to help restore some of the
Shoreline.
the shoreline. And I think about one of the things they talked about, like, yeah, okay, some people are putting in riprap instead of building walls or taking homes down, so that's great. But there's still, I think when we talk about what are we going to talk about in 2026, one of the things that came from that was people really want to put in, patios and things like that. So the reason we did the decks were allowed instead of, it was about the impervious surface again, So, I guess that I think that we do have to, around the shoreline, we still have to be incentivized however possible to get people to do things that are going to be less impactful. A lot of the association does a lot of the things do a lot.
We have a very significant problem, and and that's the hardening of the shoreline. And that was one of the biggest things that was cited there. In 2022, I did a search on all the permits that were given. I spoke at the Board of Trustees, I gave public comment. And at that time, it went back to 2000, so anything that was hardened before that isn't even in there. But at the rate we're going, at that time, 2022, 4 years later, 54 years from now, we'll have a completely hardened shoreline. And I know there's only so much the township has, because you got the high water mark, there's a lot that comes in here. But if there's some way that we could either get some insight from the, well, there's like, I don't know if he still handles it, but Joe Noner. During the COVID time, I was listening to presentations. He said, we're giving out too many, but they still continue to do it. They still DNR, I believe, on a lot of it. Because DNR handles the habitat. And maybe it's both. I can't say.
Did they have really cracked down on riprap shorelines?
They haven't really done it in a way that, a lot of it has to do, and I remember talking with Mike Rademacher during this time, it's education. But if there's something we could do, maybe even get a conversation with the state, whether it be Eagle or DNR or both, what have you, include the association. There's some wonderful things that are happening out there. I just went to Glen Lake's annual meeting. They have a book, I mean, a pamphlet. They spent a lot of money on it, but they have consultations with people around the lake. They offer this to people, and they do it in a way out there that doesn't offend people. If you saw the thing in the ticker about doing overlay district in North Lake Leelanau, people are very upset about it, and I can understand that. They're almost like they're trying to form, some claimed an HOA. There's got to be a way we do it to protect it. It's an incredible resource, and we're really harming the health of the lake. It really, the biggest influence we have on lakes is at the shoreline. Yeah. So I don't want to harp on this too long.
Don't they regulate weight boats at all?
No.
That's getting to be
Oh, my
huge.
husband wants to know the answer to that.
No, they don't.
They're hell on shoreline. and
Yeah.
That's forcing people to harden.
Yeah, there's a lot of-
Harden their shoreline, or they're gonna lose it all.
There's a lot of research that's being done on that, and they're proving, and some states are really big on it now, or starting to incorporate, but Michigan, not yet. But something that would dovetail with what was done with research on the shoreline, what people want to do and stuff like that, whether it be decks, impervious surfaces, but we're missing something there.
And there may be technology now that make it work.
Well, bioengineered shorelines are incredible, what they will do. And there's a lot, I meant to bring that pamphlet, and I'll drop it off to you.
So just to level set from as far as what this commission can do, we are not the permitting agent when it comes to shoreline hardening. You're correct. That's done at a state level. So we will not be able to impose standards at that level. Can we have the state come in and educate? Definitely. The gentleman's name that does it in our area is Jack Rosignol. He's out of Cadillac. He, I'm sure, would be willing to come up and discuss that with us if you have questions for him. The upland area, so anything above the water, we do have regulatory rights to. Tina, you're right. There are currently waterfront decking requirements. And you mentioned incentivizing. Something like that might look like if you're using an impervious surface, you're allowed X size of deck. But if you use a pervious surface and you maintain its perviousness or its ability to drain water, thank you, you might be able to build a bigger one, right? So that would be a natural way to incentivize a homeowner to choose the ecologically more sensitive option than not. I think that is something that this board should take a look at, maybe more in depth, for sure. And yes, the zoning office gets questions about that daily, so that's why Matt has brought it up in the past.
We talked about that a lot at the process where we were looking at Long Lake and dredging and all of that. And I know Yeah, when Stu Kogi was talking to us about it, he spent a fair amount of time talking about how enforcement is as big a problem as creating the rules and regulations, because we talked about, should we have a, pick your number, 25 feet, 50 feet, some buffer from the lake, and Stu pretty much said, you can do that, but you can't enforce that. And then I don't know if the world has changed enough where we can enforce those kinds of things now, but that was,
Thinking about the tip line.
Are you, Pete, just so I'm understanding, are you talking about leaving natural vegetation enforcement, or are you talking about construction of an,
I'm not talking about setbacks, I'm talking about natural vegetation.
Yeah, that is difficult.
So,
Nature does what nature does.
Right, but what I have seen that does work, I'm a member of 5 different lake associations. And Lake Leelanau being one of them, Glen Lake being one, Crystal Lake being one. They all have their unique issues, but I'll tell you, the thing that is amazing is how they do the education. So if we're talking about bringing somebody in from state, let's get the people from the board of the Long Lake Association.
Sure.
That might help them find some direction in taking care of the lake and get some ideas. I know there's people that probably would attend, probably like Rob Carner, who's been the watershed biologist for almost 50 years on Glen Lake. He just retired. And get some ideas going in how, not to force people to do things, educate them, help them understand why we need to do this. And the outcome they're having is incredible. We do shoreline surveys, comprehensive shoreline surveys, video, in close detail, and we show the difference. And their Lime Lake, they just got 3 people to bioengineer their shores and that. We're not going to do it, but we can help facilitate it.
Yep, so one of the main functions of this commission, besides reviewing applications or working on the zoning ordinance, is the ability to facilitate. So if there is an issue like this that we don't have necessarily direct regulatory power over, getting the needed parties in a room is definitely something the 7 of you have the power and maybe should do in some of these instances. So just keep staff informed. We can help you coordinate. We oftentimes have the contact for a lot of these folks, so we can do that moving forward if that's something that's desired.
I have a separate question. In the 2006 survey, the report that you sent us, they specifically identified 10 parcels that they identified for purchase or preservation. And I see they didn't do that in this report. And then I tie that with Tina's comment about if those parcels come up for sale, they'll be very expensive and a developer will be the one to buy them. Is the township in a position to be able to compete for purchase of those, and should we identify those if that's the case?
That would be a good question for the township board.
I think that somebody who has put their property into a conservation easement would be more likely to sell to the township at a reduced rate than somebody who's just has a generic piece of land.
So some of those things are identified, were the ones that have been purchased.
Right.
And we had, if anybody remembers, or what's in your tax bill, we actually had, it was on ballot, to create a fund to purchase, and that was Cedar Run Creek.
Yep. And we passed that.
South Lawn.
Yeah.
Was it South Lawn?
Yeah, South Lawn.
Yep.
I feel like there was one more, something smaller. And so that was passed, that was after 2006, right? So I think part of the reason that was in there is because we knew that we were going to try to go for a ballot measure and say, well, tell us what we should do. So, yeah, I think that's a good idea because it is possible, there's still a DNR trust fund that you can get money from. We've been very successful, so.
I participated with that for our lake, and the millage wasn't needed even though it was passed because we got the grant from the trust fund.
No, we still needed the paper.
But I thought we got all of it from the trust fund. We didn't? Okay.
We got like half.
Okay.
And they won't pay more than that. So, and they did the same thing with the Girl Scout camp, but they were able to have other people help with that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea. That isn't us, right? But we could say it's us because, we're trying, if we're going to put together measures to do things piecemeal. We need to have somebody at a different level putting together bigger plans. Yeah, because you look at some of this, there's some pretty important areas there that are not protected at all.
If the seven of you desire enough to go down that road, you guys are allowed to send correspondence to the township board.
We're allowed to
So,
talk to the township.
oh, sure. You're an advisory body. That's literally what you're supposed to do. So if you guys are looking at this NFI and you say, hey, look, this screams, we need to identify, 5, 10 parcels that would be prime for purchase if they come up. Hey, township board, please be aware of this because of this priority area, because of this natural feature. You can put that in a memo to the township board. You have the right to do so.
I guess part of my question was that intentional? I mean, I don't know who asked for this review. Was it intentional not to do that this time around?
It wasn't intentional not to do that this time around, is my understanding. There was a scope of services, and I believe it was fairly vaguely worded as far as just update, not necessarily keep certain components and exclude certain components.
So something that's totally not related to anything we talked about, and I've been thinking about the storage thing last month. And that it was a little bit difficult, first of all, to describe what we wanted done. But is there anything as a planning commission, as far as like zoning ordinance, where we could put in, for the places that there are no natural features, even including a couple of trees, I guess ways that would give us a little bit more strength in being able to do that. I'm going to go stop by there one of these days and tell them to stop mowing in front of it, because I think that was one of these. But I was like, I tell them to do that, and I just go, hey, you know what I'd do if I were you? Anyway.
The short answer to your question is yes. The planning commission has the right to propose zoning ordinance changes to the township board, including site plan review options. One thing that has been mentioned a few times, and maybe we'll develop a bit better with the ad hoc committee, is potentially creating like 3 different standardized buffer options that when a site plan and a commercial development comes up, it doesn't have any natural features that they're forced to protect. Be more standardized in the sense of, here are your 3 buffer options. Planning commission approves this as long as buffer option 1 or 2 are chosen, and this is moved forward. That would be something that's more standardized instead of like last meeting where on the fly you guys are trying to match your intent. It'd be much easier to have, these are your options moving forward, and then you guys, myself, and the developer know these are all potential things that they can have us put in here. And a lot of developers, I will guarantee you, will pick an option to present to you and say, this is what I would like to do, and you can say, no, let's do option 2 or let's do option 1, that's fine. That would be a much more efficient use, and it would be a much more vetted use than trying to come up with it on the fly. So with that understanding, I know we've had some changeover since the ad hoc committee was developed. That kind of direction is perfect and will dovetail in. Commissioner Springsteen, I know you're interested in working on that ad hoc committee. Commissioner Paulson, you mentioned maybe want to do that. So if you gentlemen, if I don't remember to bring it up, let's bring it up at the ad hoc meeting. I did just send you guys notices today about the next ad hoc meeting, so we can get into that here when we go through those things in more depth. Any other questions, comments, concerns, insults?
And one thing,
Yeah.
we talked about this before, but it seems like the biggest loophole that I see, if someone buys 80 acres of natural feature, whatever.
Sure.
One,
Mm-hmm.
and they come to us, we can regulate through site plan what they do. But
Sure.
if they just clear the 80 acres and don't come to us, which, beg for forgiveness is right? How do we plug that loophole? I mean, that seems to be that people are just
You
going to
can't
go around
develop
it.
within 10 years of clear cutting.
That would be a great legal question for the legal team, because we currently have an item that says you,
Getting into lawsuits on all of that as well.
Sure.
So,
I don't know if there's a good regulatory measure to do that, because you're towing the line between restricting property rights that folks have to manage their vegetation as they see fit without developing in it, but then say they do that in November and the spring rolls around, they said, you know what, never mind, I do want to sell it. how are you ever going to approve the intent that they had to get around that regulation? It's extremely difficult. I guess I would lean on Todd and his team to tell us if there's a good way to do that that's held up in court, because like you said, we're just going to end up in lawsuits at that point if we're trying to enforce those, so.
I wonder if there are any other jurisdictions in the country that have tried to do that, and if we could learn from their
Sure.
efforts.
There's one called Canton versus, Township of Canton versus, and I can't remember who the plaintiff is, that they had I call it a pay-for-play program, but it's a tree ordinance that you weren't allowed to remove priority areas like we have unless you paid for each tree that went into a tree fund that they then transplanted to a park or something like that. And they got into a disagreement, and now that method of regulatory power is no longer valid in the state of Michigan under that case law. So-
But I wonder if nationwide there's some other examples.
I'm sure there
We can't be
is.
the only ones thinking about it.
There's many, I guess, for lack of a better word, progressive states for natural features that have different laws. The issue is, as soon as you get into another state, they have a different zoning enabling act. So what they are allowed to do may be different from what we're allowed to do, but even statewide, there's going to be some other,
We had that question already, and he said there was only one case to his knowledge where the township won over the developer.
Yeah.
And the judge still made them pay the value of the lumber. So they told him we couldn't clear it, we had to pay for it.
it's a very difficult thing to regulate. I think from a planning standpoint, the best productivity we have moving forward is to incentivize developers to choose to preserve natural features, either by an open space conservation or by giving it some sort of incentive to not fully clear cutting before building or developing. It's a long way around your answer, or your question, Max, but
It just seems like it's a big loophole that
it's very difficult to prove.
So is this something that we're gonna, we had listed on our priorities for the year, like going through certain things in the zoning ordinance? Is that something, like, how do we even have this discussion?
You gentlemen probably haven't read it yet, but I just emailed the ad hoc committee today a report that goes through the zoning ordinance addressing these areas, where they're at. And then that ad hoc committee's job is to send this report back to the seven of you with recommendation and options. So they're going to dive into the details, say, hey, this section, we have 3 different options that we can make it better to meet our master plan. Let's review these. And then we'll go through them step by step by step.
But that's primarily trees,
In buffering,
not impervious surfaces.
that has not been included in that scope, no. Yep. So that would have to be either a separate ad hoc committee, which means more meetings, or it would be a different priority you give to staff, and I bring in people to help educate us on those issues.
Then the other thing I was just gonna ask is, if we did come, whether it's them or us or all of us together, come to a place where, like, we have a whole list of, do you think this would be legal, and we brainstorm those things? How could we get Todd to come to a meeting?
Sure.
To just go through our list, I don't want to get all time, but,
If we have a dedicated list, I would even prep him by sending it to him prior,
yeah, give him the list first and then we.
because it's very difficult for him to comment on things on the fly.
Right. Because attorneys.
Lawyers are naturally reserved in that sense, understandably so.
They can play what they want for lunch.
So, but yes, they can be, if we are down the hole far enough that we have a couple of options that we are truly considering, we will always have a legal review before any draft language is brought before you.
But sometimes we might need a little bit of things.
Back and forth, totally fine. We have the budget to do so. Anything else? Sweet.
All right, then for now, we will let this go. We're gonna wait and see how the ad hoc committee comes through, and then see what we have to do after that. So, next, public comment? Seeing none, I'll move on to reports. Dan, would be here at the township board report. Do you have anything you want to report in his staff?
Not for the township board, nope.
Zoning board of appeals.
No meetings, nothing to report.
All right, nothing. Cody, planners update.
Yeah. I have two things. One, we've touched on a little bit. August 6th at 11 a.m. will be our next ad hoc meeting for the tree preservation. Again, that's just what we're calling it. It includes buffer vegetation and so on and so forth. Commissioners Springsteen and Paulson, I sent that information to your emails today. If you have questions, let me know. I'll be out for the next week, but I'd be happy to answer them when I get back. Or if Matt knows the answer to them, he'll be happy to respond to them. It's the two commissioners, and then there are a variety of public participants, residents that have. Correct. The
I
second
can
thing.
tell you names of people who've asked to be on it. I don't know if that's what you're asking.
No, I just wanted to know
Okay.
if there's board representation and all citizens.
All citizens that I'm aware of.
Correct. The second thing I have to report on is data centers. So I just want to give you a brief understanding of where the township currently stands. I know it's been a hot topic lately. There is a report that's going to be heading to the township board in August that is going to be formally written out, a lot of what I'm saying. But staff's analysis on data centers is this. So the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act is a state law that allows us to have zoning districts in general. It's the whole reason we're here. It is permissive in nature, meaning we don't tell you what you can't do, we tell you what you can do. So that said, data centers are currently not an approved use either conditionally or permitted in the township. We do not say you are allowed to construct a data center in Long Lake Township. Could a developer that wants to put a data center come in and try to put it under a warehouse definition? Potentially. But those definitions are restrictively written so much that it'd be very, very difficult for them to do so. Second, that analysis was sent to legal to make sure that we're covered in that basis, and the legal team agrees with the planning department on that. They feel that a developer does not have the right to come to the township and apply for a data center. We don't allow them. That said, the state of Michigan does not allow us to outright ban a use in our township unless it's otherwise regulated. So things like adult film stores or marijuana stores, those are regulated at state level. They have a bunch of regulation to go with them. We're allowed to ban those. We don't currently allow marijuana shops in the township. But other uses, housing, businesses, water parks, we cannot outright ban them because Michigan Zoning Enabling Act is permissive. So we cannot say you can't do it. But in order for somebody to construct a use in the township that's not listed in the zoning ordinance, they would have to take the township to court. They'd have to prove in a court of law that there's a demonstrated need for that use. Now, that doesn't mean a demonstrated need just restrictive in our 36 square miles. They can say Northern Michigan needs a data center. I do not know the ins and outs of what steps they would have to do to prove that, but just that in itself for somebody looking to develop a data center is a big enough regulatory hurdle that they're going to go somewhere closer by that currently permits them. So off the top of my head, I know Garfield permits data centers. They're working on changing their regulatory measures, but there's other townships or non-zoned areas close to us. Correct. So the other thing that townships are doing they're putting moratoriums in. Moratoriums are time limited. So you're just kicking the can down the road until they can get their zoning ordinance squared. Blair has municipal water, so that might be a good idea for, I'm not suggesting a developer should go there. I'm just saying they're more likely than Long Lake. Long Lake, you'd have to put a private well in. You're not allowed to do it in the zoning ordinance. It would be an uphill battle. If staff receives a data center application, it will still come to you. You guys are the regulatory body that gets to approve or deny it. But you will see from a letter from myself and from legal stating that that use is not currently permitted in the zoning ordinance, recommending that you turn down that application. I just wanted to level set from a data center's perspective. There's lots of literature on it right now. Long story short, the township doesn't have to enact anything currently because we currently don't allow data centers. So us doing nothing doesn't mean we're not looking at the issue. In fact, staff has been through multiple trainings researching it, but it is because we currently don't have any other regulatory power to put on it to stop data centers from coming to the township.
So if somebody wants somebody wants to put one on the township where there's no water facility.
Okay.
And they brought an application here and we say, oh, no, can't do it because it's not allowed.
Okay.
Do they then, that that would then open up their ability to sue and say you're not allowed anything.
So any decision made by the,
We could then say, we got a moratorium, and we're gonna go through and do that.
I'll-
I think that's what we did with sexual work.
I will let Todd talk about that. But yes, any appealed decision of the planning commission, depending on what it is, either goes to the zoning board of appeals or it goes to circuit court. So if you guys make a decision that a developer doesn't agree with, they do have the right to appeal it. But like I said, if we don't allow any use, they have to prove a demonstrated need. Might be difficult to do. I don't know what their hurdles are.
That this is the only place.
Correct, yep, exactly. And it's, frankly, it's not.
Tina, I'm not sure I understood what you asked, because then you said, then we would ask for a moratorium, because what I'm hearing is, there's no way we need a moratorium.
No, but if there was a lawsuit and somehow they said, yes, you do have to, you're not allowing them, and that's the challenge, then we say, okay, then now we can stop and talk about it. But that's only if the court says you're not allowing it. We need to do something.
So sometimes it's easier to think about these things when you're not talking about a hot button use. So I use water park as my default. Somebody comes in, they want to put a water park in the township. We don't allow it. Nothing in our book says you're allowed to do a water park. They come and they say, we're going to try anyways, and they submit an application to me. I'm not the deciding factor on that. It comes to you guys anyways, regardless of whether it's a permitted use or not. You guys look at the zoning ordinance and go, water park's not allowed, denied. And we deny it because we don't, finding of fact says it's not allowed in the zoning ordinance. That developer still has the right to appeal that decision. They do it in circuit court, and they have to prove a demonstrated need that the township needs a water park, or the surrounding area needs a water park. So that's currently how that regulatory step process works. And what Tina's mentioning is if we deny that water park and we know they're going to go to court, she's asking, can we then put a moratorium in place that says we're not going to process any applications regarding a water park until we get this moratorium completed? The moratorium part, I don't know. I'll let Todd speak to that. But as far as the steps, that is how the steps work. Correct.
I'm still a little bit confused about that. Are you saying then the moratorium is in case the circuit court says that they do have a right to do it, and then we have to have our rules and regulations in place for that?
It's when they rule that.
If they rule that way, you think they will rule that way?
Well, like
Yeah.
you said, they have to show a demonstrated
Right.
that this is the primary location to serve.
Because it seems to me that we're in a good position right now, and not putting things in place is better than having a moratorium to figure out what to put in place.
Yes.
As far as legal strategy, I'll let Todd talk about that. But correct, if, as
Yes.
far as our zoning ordinance not allowing data
We're in a
centers,
great spot.
we currently do not allow data centers.
Yeah.
Although, I'd just like to mention that our zoning ordinance does not allow short-term rentals,
The
Doesn't
township
allow
board
what?
is aware.
short-term rentals, and we still do it, so that could put us in bed. Oh, wait, I think there too. So we should talk about that after we get done with this.
You guys are allowed to send memos to the township board, if that's something you want to take up with them. That's all I have for my planner's report.
So Cody, did I hear you right that you're going to give this in a detailed fashion at the trustees meeting?
Yeah, I was asked to write down basically what I just said and include our legal team's remarks, which are mimicking what I just mentioned.
Well, maybe you already plan to do this, but I think it'd be good to publicize that, because we've had a couple people at public
It will be
comments.
public as part of the township board meeting. so
No, I mean publicize it, not just make it public.
That would be up to the township board. They have the right to do press releases if they want. I don't see them
Yeah.
doing that, but it will be a part of the board packet. So if you have somebody who has had questions on them, encourage them to come to the next township board meeting or to look at it on the DOD site.
Or haven't watched this taped
Yeah,
meeting.
or,
I
yep,
think
exactly.
that one of the things that's always confusing, even for us, but especially for people who aren't used to it, is what he said about the zoning ordinance. Basically, you can't do anything unless it's in the zoning ordinance that says you can. And people think of it as the other way around. You know, it doesn't say I can't do this, it
Well,
doesn't say I can't do that. No, if it doesn't say it, you can't. And so I think helping people understand that when you talk to them, that's been helpful for me and my trying to explain to people.
That is often the hiccup that I find when explaining it as well.
Okay, is there anything, any other questions for Cody right now? All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.
So, is the tape off?